Let's start off a talk on the development of your open guard game in the sport of jiu-jitsu. There's a sense in which we're heading into open water here, going into to open guard. There are literally dozens of different open guards. Any one of those open guards, say for example spider guard, danaher guard, or what have you, could be the subject of an entire video. And so there's a sense here in which complexity becomes a problem. If there's so many different open guards and so many different possibilities, this could turn into a 10,000 hour video. And of course, that's not going to help you in your development. And so there's a sense in which what we have to start doing is giving you guys a program to start narrowing down the course of the study so we can focus on the most important elements in your initial development in the open guard game. I want to start off by first contrasting open guard with closed guard. We covered closed guard in another video, but let's quickly just run through the differences between the two to illustrate some elements with regards to your development in your open guard game. Whenever we work from closed guard, it's very much a compartmentalized position. So I have an opponent here in my closed guard. There's a sense here in which as long as my guard is closed around my opponent's lower back, he can't even think about passing my guard. There's no guard pass on his part until he opens my guard. So in a situation here, I can focus entirely upon my offense. Okay, I have absolute confidence that as long as my guard is closed, he's not going to be passing. It's not until he physically opens my guard, usually by standing up, that he can actually engage in any kind of real positional offense. The submission opportunities that he has inside my closed guard are extremely limited and very low percentage. I, on the other hand, have many forms of offense that I can use against him. So there's a sense here in which as long as I maintain my closed guard and keep my opponent inside my crossed ankles, it's a one-way street. It's all about my offense on him. That all changes once my guard starts opening. Once my guard opens, now it's a two-way street where I can attack him and he can attack me. He can attack me, for example, with positional attacks, guard passes. He might even try lower body submissions. There's all kinds of things he can do now, which he couldn't do as long as my ankles were crossed around behind his back. So there's a sense here in which the moment we get into an open guard situation, now I'm not just attacking him, I'm attacking him in the context where he's also simultaneously attacking me. I'm attacking with positional moves, sweeps. I'm attacking with submissions. He can do the same thing to me. So the overall sense of how the game gets played out is radically different. It's no longer the one-way street of me just attacking him from a compartmentalized, localized position. Now, 10,000 different things can start happening from here. He could stand up to his feet. Okay, he could start scooping underneath my two legs. He could start grabbing a hold of my gi pants. He could start throwing my ankles by. And then from situations like this, now I'm rather defensive from here. I've got to play between offense and defense. When I worked from closed guard, as long as my guard was closed, my hips were above his hips, it was just about my offense. And now it's a completely different scenario, where there's a much more dynamic back and forth between his attempts to attack me with guard passes and perhaps even lower body submissions, and my attempts to attack him positionally and with submissions at the same time. So you get a much faster, much more dynamic play in the open guard situation. There's a sense here in which the closed guard is rather like sailing on a calm, placid lake, whereas open guard is rather like sailing on the open ocean. And as such, it's much more intimidating. There's a lot more going on, but ultimately the rewards are greater. Navigating your way through that open ocean of open guard can be a little tricky. And there's so much possible content out there that it's important for your development that we start to narrow things down a little. And we start to give you, okay, what are the most important things for me to focus on as a developing student in my open guard game? There's 10,000 things we could be doing. Start to give me an idea of what are the most important things that we could work on. Now, it's perfectly natural to ask at this point, okay, if open guard is such a fast, dynamic situation with so many different kinds of guards, how much do I need to know? How fast do I have to be? How many of these different guards do I have to become a master of? The simple answer is You don't need to know a vast number of guards, nor do you need to be the fastest kid on the block in order to be highly effective from open guard. What I'm going to say to you is there are 4 main elements that you need to become familiar with. The first of these is the notion of connection to your opponent. If I'm working with a training partner and I have no form of connection to him, just take a standing position. I have no form of connection to him, but he has, say, for example, connection to me through my gi pants. This would create a situation where there is an obvious imbalance of connection. I have no connection to his body. He has an effective connection to mine. As a result, he would have a definitive grip advantage where he could start moving to an angle and start passing and causing a lot of problems for me. Okay, that would all change if I had effective points of connection with my opponent. Okay, now you have 4 limbs that you can work with in guard position. One of the great advantages of guard position is because I'm on my back, I can fight with all 4 of my limbs, as opposed to an example where I'm on my knees, where I can only really fight with 2 of my limbs. Okay. So the great inherent advantage of working from open guard is that it allows you to work with all 4 limbs against an opponent who can really only use 2 limbs, his 2 arms against you. So there's a sense in which you sacrifice something by taking bottom position. He does have a top position. He has greater mobility over you, but you gain something, and it's the ability to fight him with all 4 limbs at the same time while he can only use 2 limbs against you. Now, what we want to do is start forming effective connections to him. Okay. And as much as possible, I want to connect with all 4 of my limbs. That's not always possible. Sometimes you can only connect with 1 limb, 2 limbs, 3 limbs, but the ideal is 4 points of connection to your opponent's body. And as much as possible, that's what we want to work with. So for example, I could connect with both of my hands at my training partner's sleeve cuffs. I could put a connection here with a foot in the bicep. I could kick a leg through and around and put a foot on my training partner's lower back. And now you would have 4 points of connection to your opponent's body, 2 hands and 2 feet. So that if my opponent started walking around my body as fast as he could to try and gain some kind of advantage, you would see that the connection means that it nullifies my opponent's movement. If he tried to aggressively push into me, for example, I would stop him with the connection that I have to my training partner's body. If he tried to violently pull away from me, I could make it difficult for him to do this too, through those points of connection. If he tried to outflank me and move to either side of my body, that 4 points of connection will make it very difficult for him to do so. Okay? So there's a sense here in which by connecting to my opponent's body in the strongest way possible, which is through all 4 of my limbs, you can nullify your opponent's ability to move, his abilities to use speed to get around me. This is the way I want you thinking in terms of forming the ideal of 4 points of connection. Now, that's an ideal. Of course, there's going to be times you can't get all 4 of your limbs connected to your opponent, and you'll have to be effective with 1, 2, or 3. But as much as possible, when we work from open guard, the ideal that we're looking for is 4 points of connection. Let's go further with the theme of 4 points of connection and start to understand that your opponent's body has a center line and obviously a left side and a right side. As much as possible, when we exert points of connection, you want to control both sides of your opponent's body. Okay, so if I have an opponent here in front of me and I have connections to only one side of his body, I have a right hand here and a left hand here, that means I'm only connected to the left side of Kyle's body. The right side can start stepping around behind me and causing all kinds of problems in situations like this. Okay, as much as possible, when we form connections with more than one limb, you want to start connecting to both sides of his body. So for example, the guy's standing in front of me and I have a single hook here inside my opponent's leg. It's the easiest thing in the world for my opponent to start backstepping in this direction and disconnecting and forming angles on me. But if I have 2 on both sides of the body, when he tries to do the same motion, this foot here takes care of his ability to move to my right. And if he tries to go in the other direction, this foot here takes care of his ability to move to my left. 2 points of connection on both sides of the body create far more problems than 2 points of connection on the same side of the body. Okay, so the ideal is always 4 points of connection on both sides of the human body. If we can do that, you will strongly nullify your opponent's ability to use dynamic speed and movement to overcome your open guard. These are the ideals then. 4 points of connection on both sides of the body. As much as possible, we point ourselves in that idealistic direction. Sometimes we can't live up to it, But as long as we're consistently moving in that direction, you don't need to be the fastest guy on the block. You can use connection to overcome your opponent's speed advantage. Now, the next big skill you need working from open guard is the ability to understand the difference between an offensive and a defensive cycle. Remember that a distinguishing characteristic of open guard is that you're in a situation where he can attack you and I can attack at the same time. And as a result, there's a much greater dynamic between the two athletes. We're both trying to attack each other. He's trying to pass my guard. I'm trying to attack him. And in that attack, counterattack cycle, you have to understand where you are in that overall cycle between you and your opponent. Are you in a defensive cycle or are you in an offensive cycle? Let's give you some clear pointers on this right now. Okay, if I have an opponent in front of me, let's divide our body up into various lines. Okay, I have a center line that runs down obviously the center of my body. I have a foot line or toe line, as I often refer to it. It's the line that joins my two toes. As my opponent moves further away from me, he gets further and further away from my toe line. He becomes less and less threatening. Okay, as he starts coming closer and closer, the onus is on me now to start forming connections to my opponent. Okay, I go a little further away. I don't want to start reaching too far. Now I've got an extended leg. You can throw a leg by when it gets extended, it causes problems for me. Okay, so I don't want to get too bold with my reaching here. We try to keep our knees close to our chest like so, and we're a little circumspect about reaching too far. Now, the most important line when it comes time to understand an offensive versus a defensive cycle is my hip line. If my opponent takes his right foot and steps up to my hip line, that's a serious problem. Okay, he's starting to get very close now to passing my guard. At this point, you are absolutely in a defensive cycle. It would be folly on my part to attempt submission holds or sweeps from a position like this. Okay, as he takes a further step around and starts lowering his level, the threat gets worse and worse. Okay, for me to attempt arm locks, sweeps from this position would be absolute stupidity on my part. This is the time to be thinking defensively. This is the time for us to be constructing frames on our training partner's body. As a general rule, our favorite frames in these kinds of situations are here inside the arm, because there's a danger my opponent will get to control my head. And then from here, as he lowers his level, once he gets a hold of my head and shoulders, you've got a serious problem on your hands. So as much as possible, we want to frame inside our training partner's arms. When he reaches for the head, now it's a difficult thing. And this will create situations where we can use our legs to recover, like so, by forming a scissor around our training partner's body and pulling our center line back in alignment with his center line. Okay. Now, with our center lines matched up, I am in an offensive cycle. When my center line correlates with his, I'm in a situation now where I can start to easily form connections to our training partner. And from here, we can start to get on the attack. Okay. Once we're connected in situations like this, we've got 4 points of connection. Now, when he starts to try and form an angle from here, those 4 points of connection will connect you to him, moving around. And from here, once again, we're locked in place and we can nullify our opponent's speed and guard passing methods very, very easily. But as long as my opponent is stepping around and threatening my hip line, this is the time for me to switch my mindset. Okay. From here, I'm no longer thinking in terms of offense. I'm thinking only in terms of getting that alignment of defense. Okay. Where we're going to use our feet to realign with our training partner. And here, for a situation like this, we're back in a situation where we can get into offense. Okay. So let's understand the notion of a defensive and offensive cycle. Anytime my opponent is challenging my hip line, you've got to start thinking in terms of defense and forming frames and recovering your legs, okay, and getting yourself back to the center line. You're in an offensive cycle when your center line is lined up with your opponent, and you can start forming strong connections to your opponent. And as a result, you'll be in an offensive cycle where you can start launching your own attacks. Probably the single most common problem I see in beginning athletes is they attempt offensive actions when they're actually in a defensive cycle. Once you understand the notion of center line and hip line, and how if your opponent is lined up with the center line, that's a good time to attack. That's a good time to form your connections and get onto the attacks that we're going to be looking at as we get further and further into this video. But once your opponent starts getting an angle and starting to threaten your hip line, you must switch your priorities from offense into defense, forming defensive frames that enable you to scissor your legs over, realign yourself with your opponent's body, and get center line to center line to go back into an offensive cycle. If you want to see this in more, actually the most possible detail, you can always look at the Go Further Faster guard retention videos, where this was covered in extreme detail. But this is the basic insight into the idea of an offensive and a defensive cycle, which will guide you when you're trying to impart offense from your open guard, as we'll be looking at in this video. Now, the third great characteristic you're going to need to be successful in open guard situation is the ability to use the connection that you've gained to your opponent to actually attack your opponent. Okay, so it's one thing to connect to the guy and just say, well, he's not going to pass my guard now. Well, that's good. But ultimately, the whole idea behind open guard is to use the myriad offensive possibilities that the various open guards offer you to actually go out there and beat someone from bottom position. We want you to see this as a positive attacking situation, where rather than just hold on and maintain an open guard and prevent your opponent from passing, we want to cycle in some strong offense and actually take the fight to the top athlete and start racking up points and submissions upon them. So we've got to start learning to use that connection that we've gained to go into offense. And of course, that will be the great majority of the content of this video. Okay, once we've actually gotten into an offensive cycle, the precise moves, etc., we're going to see a mountain of different moves. In my opinion, the most high percentage ways to attack once you're into an offensive cycle, and that will be the majority of this video. Now, the fourth great characteristic you're going to need to be effective in open guard situations is the ability to flow seamlessly between 3 different body postures. If you just excuse me 1 minute. The first and most obvious one is a supine position. That refers to any situation where my back is on the ground. So supine positions where our back is on the ground, that's probably the most common form of open guard posture that we must be effective from. The second are seated scenarios, where we're seated in front of our opponent, our back is off the ground, and we're working like so. We must be able to go smoothly and seamlessly from supine to seated, and from seated to supine. There is a third posture that we must also become very familiar with, and this is kneeling postures, where we come up to our knees and work from our knees. Okay, and I should be able to go from knees back into seated. I should be able to go from knees back into supine and seated together. Okay? So this ability to flow seamlessly between supine postures, seated postures, and kneeling postures is a huge part of your development. If you only use 1 or 2 of those 3 possible postures, you are absolutely doing yourself a disservice. Okay? Becoming proficient in open guard is largely about the ability to flow seamlessly between supine, seated, and kneeling postures, back and forth between the two in long strings and combinations, to be able to exploit all the myriad offensive possibilities from an open guard situation. So if we have a seated situation, down on your knees, from a situation where I'm seated and my opponent is looking to pass, the penalty of seated situations is that your back is exposed. Your back is off the floor. So that if my opponent started to get an angle on me and started coming around to the side, there would be a danger of back exposure. Okay? As he comes around the side, I should be able to, under these circumstances, put my back rapidly on the floor to prevent that back exposure. Right now, my back's exposed to him. As he comes around to try and get hooks in, etc., etc., I should be able to put my back on the floor in the blink of an eye, and then from here, recover, center line to center line, and go back into offense. So that's the penalty behind using seated postures. There is some degree of back exposure. Okay? So what's the benefit? The benefit is you get to be able to impart momentum upon your opponent. So if I have an opponent here, I can use momentum upon my opponent to throw my body to the floor and generate a throwing momentum, which will often off-balance people and result in beautiful sweeps, many of which we'll be looking at later on in this video. In addition, it gives me far more mobility if I have a standing opponent who's moving around. Because I'm in a seated position, I can move quite readily with them. It also gives us a tremendous ability to quickly come up to our knees and go into attack an opponent in standing position. So those are the pros of this position. The con is that it comes with the idea of back exposure, but there's so many great benefits to sitting up, that this is absolutely something you want to make a big part of your game. Supine positions have a huge benefit. They enable you to use all four of your limbs at the same time to grapple an opponent. You can make strong connections to your opponent with all four of your limbs on both sides of the body, which leads into a vast number of attacks. Another great benefit of this position is that there's no real sense of back exposure. If my opponent starts moving around to an angle, my back is never exposed to him as long as my back is on the floor. As he comes around the corner and lowers his level, it makes it very easy for me to go into inverted positions. We'll come up like so, or coming around further, coming around like so. And so it enables us to invert in both directions and quickly recover our legs. However, a supine posture does come at a price, and that price is lack of mobility. Okay, when you're flat on your back, it's not so easy for us to move rapidly around on the floor. So again, there's pros and cons to the position. It gives you a tremendous ability to spin, invert on your shoulders, bring knees to chest into strong defensive postures, connect with all four of your limbs on your opponent, but it does come at the price that you're kind of stuck in that position. You can't really move from there. Kneeling postures give an amazing ability to move forward and into your opponent. Okay, put your leg back. So from situations like this gives me a tremendous ability to move into an opponent and start putting people down in various kinds of ways. Okay, it gives us an ability for forward movement into our opponent. Now, it does come at a price, and that price is obviously back exposure. Okay, your opponent gets an angle on you, there's a potential problem there. So we should be able to go in the blink of an eye. In a situation where my opponent starts to get an angle on me, I should always be able to sit back down into seated positions from a kneeling position very, very quickly. Okay, so I should be able to go from kneeling to sitting in the blink of an eye. Okay, it's not a difficult skill to learn, but this ability to use these three postures, kneeling, seated, and supine postures, and flow from one to the other in a seamless form is a huge part of your development in the open guard game. I'm just going to give you a quick solo drill, which I encourage you to use. Excuse me 1 second. As a warm-up before class. Okay, and it just demonstrates the idea of moving between seated, supine, and kneeling positions in ways which will warm your body up and prepare you for the various kinds of body movements that will make you effective from an open guard scenario. So if we start off in a seated situation in front of an imaginary opponent, rather like shadow grappling, and we quickly go down and back up. So every time we go through and up onto our shoulders, we come up. We can go on both sides, and we go from seated down to supine, and we post a hand on the floor and come up into kneeling postures, back down into seated postures, moving around the mat, up into kneeling postures, back down to supine, and moving in this kind of fashion. Simple body movements like this provide an excellent warm-up and provide the kinds of body skills between those three fundamental postures, supine, seated, and kneeling, which you will require to gain excellence in open guard. Now, in this video, you'll hear me talking a lot about the notion of connection to your opponent, and I would be doing you a disservice if I didn't talk a little right from the outset about what is this notion of connection? What are you talking about here? Let's understand that in any kind of grappling situation, nothing happens until the two athletes actually make connection with each other, as opposed to, say, for example, a boxing situation where the two boxers have no connection to each other. A punch can still be thrown, they can still be effective with no connection. Grappling doesn't even occur until the two athletes get a hold of each other. So connection is the absolute basis of grappling and what makes it all possible. Literally none of the grappling moves in any form of grappling style would be possible without the two athletes connecting to each other. So we need to understand the notion of connection, how it pertains to the idea of open guard, since it forms such a big part of the enterprise. Understand that when we go to connect with our opponent, it will be radically different, facing me on your knees, whether we go to grip a hold of our opponent's body versus the clothing around the body. Okay, the gi provides an incredibly versatile and fascinating method of connection. The gi is cloth around the body, and I can connect to that cloth, and because the body is inside the cloth, I can effectively move the body by moving the cloth around. Okay, in a no-gi situation, then I have to grab the body directly. Okay, so we have two ways of gripping. We can grab the clothing around the body in the case of gi training, or we grab the body itself in the case of no gi. Now, ultimately, the ideal that I want you guys pushing towards is to be effective in both scenarios. In this video, most of the moves are demonstrated with a jacket on, but of course, for your long-term development and just for your development in general, you want to be effective in both scenarios. So let's talk about this idea of connection as it pertains to most beginner classes, which are taught in a gi first. If I had one method of getting a preliminary connection to my opponent's body when we're working with a gi on, it would be the cross collar. The cross collar grip, when we're working down on the ground, is without any question the single best way of getting an initial connection to an opponent, which controls the distance between you and leads smoothly and effectively into both offense and defense from open guard. Okay, and as such, it has a special place in your open guard development. It's one you must learn to actively seek out and actively use to your benefit. Let's understand the benefits of working with cross collar grips. We're both standing. Let's understand the difference between a straight collar grip and a cross collar grip. Okay, straight collar grips are where I take my right hand to my opponent's left lapel. Okay, stand up straight. From here, just like so. Okay, this is typically the way in which we grip in most standing scenarios. Okay, because when I take a sleeve on the other side, he's gripping me obviously, I now have control of both sides of my training partner's body. Okay, as opposed to a situation where I have one grip on him where one side of the body is controlled, but he can take the right side of his body back and away from me, and now there's limited control of my opponent's body, limited ability to hit any kind of forward throw. Okay, there's other things I can do, but I only have one side of his body controlled. Okay, that changes when we lock on like so. Okay, now because both sides of the body are controlled, I can start turning my training partner's shoulders. I can start bringing him up and down the mat. We have much more control of our opponent's body. When we work down on the ground, typically the way we control both sides of our training partner's body is through the hands on one side and the legs on the other. Because I'm working from guard, I now have the ability to connect to him with 4 limbs rather than in standing position. Because my feet are on the ground, I can only connect to him with 2 limbs. Okay? But the moment we go down to the floor, now we have the option of connecting with 4 limbs like so. So from here, we typically go cross collar grip when we work down on the floor, as opposed to standing position, where most of the time we work with straight collar grips. Okay? Now there's a huge benefit to this. When we work with straight collar grips, it's quite a thing, just facing this way. It's quite difficult to get your first grip in on your opponent because the inside of the lapel faces away from your grip. Okay? So you actually have to do some work to get to the lapel. Very often, for example, we have to use a 2-on-1 lapel feed, where I have to physically open and feed the lapel and make the edge of the lapel face me so that I can form a good grip on my training partner's lapel. Okay? I have to employ various tricks to get an advantageous grip on the lapel. The most common one is the 2-on-1 lapel feed, where we lock it in like so. That is not true when we go with a cross collar grip. In the case of a cross collar grip, the edge of the lapel faces my hands. So it's much, much easier for me to go in and lock up a firm connection to my opponent. I usually don't need to use, I can use, but I usually don't need to use the 2-on-1 lapel feed. I can just snatch a cross collar grip much more easily than I can snatch a straight collar grip. That's not to say you can't snatch a straight collar grip. You can, but it takes more skill, more knowledge. But it's so easy just to put your hand and just slip right inside and fix up an immensely strong grip here. When he goes to pull away from me, good luck. It's very difficult. Okay. Now it's true, this only controls one side of his body. But when we work from guard position, you have your feet available, okay? And I can use my feet to connect to him. So that even though my upper body controls only one side of his body, my feet control the other side. So my right foot is controlling the left side of his body, and my right hand and left foot are controlling the right side of his body. And this way, we can work very effectively, where we have a grip, a one-handed upper body grip that controls apparently only one side of his body, but my feet take care of the rest, okay? In this way, we can be very, very effective, very, very quickly with this grip. When he tries to get up and stand away from me, look how much postural you control. Pull away. Look how much postural control you have through this incredibly effective grip. And it enables me to govern distance. He tries to pull away from me. It's so easy for me to move in. And then from here, we can go back in on the attack. Okay? If he tries to push into me, comes around my guard, tries to push into me, you can use it to create distance. He tries to come down and pin me, and it's so difficult. And you get into situations like this, okay? And you can always use it as a recovery defensive mechanism and as a pulling offensive mechanism that sets up offense. My advice to you as a developing student is to learn to trust in the incredible powers of this cross-collared grip as soon as possible and use it as often as possible, okay? Of course, you can't be naive with it. You can't just assume, oh, I've got a cross-collar grip, everything else is fine. He runs around the corner and pins you. Okay, of course, it's not, nothing is that good. Okay, it's good, but nothing's that good. But it does enable you, as someone gets angle on you, to maintain distance, and then pull them back in and align your center line with theirs. If they try to yank their body away from yours, it does enable you to control the distance. If they go to break the grip, for example, it's quite easy to use that as a setup that'll set up all kinds of various counter offense that we'll be looking at throughout this video. It's an amazingly effective grip. Get into the habit of using it as often as possible and as early as possible in your open guard game. Understand that the cross-collar grip punches in easily and is very difficult for your opponent to contend with. It's an incredibly effective an important part of your open guard arsenal that we'll be coming back to again and again throughout this video. Okay, if the most important upper body connection in open guard fundamentals is the cross collar grip, it's natural for you to ask, what's the most important lower body connection? Well, the general juxtaposition that we work with lower body connection in open guard is the juxtaposition between the soles of your feet and the shoelaces of your feet, like so. Okay, sole and shoelace. As a general rule, standing, the sole of the foot is used in a pushing fashion. Okay, the basic choice you have when it's time to connect to your opponent is the choice between pushing and pulling. Okay, when my opponent comes towards me, the soles of the feet provide a pushing force. The shoelaces of the feet provide a generally pulling force. There are some exceptions to these rules, but most of the time, the shoelaces pull and the soles push. Okay? If I have someone coming towards me, I want to create space coming towards me. We need to be able to push on an opponent. And so typically I'll be using the soles of the feet. If I work from spider guard, I want to be able to push out on my training partner's bicep. So of course it's the sole of the feet. If I want to be able to pull on someone, I want to use the shoelaces to pull people in. I can use them in so many different ways. Danaher guard, the shoelaces pull people in. Okay. Very often, one foot will employ the shoelaces to pull, and the other foot will employ the sole of the foot to push. So, for example, this variation of Danaher guard, my left shoelaces are pulling in, while my right shoelaces are pushing. And as a result, we can start getting people up into the air and moving. Okay? So learning to use your feet to both push and pull through the use of the shoelaces to pull and the soles of the feet to push is a huge part of your development. You must become very gifted very quickly at the idea of constantly looking to get a hold standing of situations like so, where I'm using both of my feet in different ways. Here, my right foot is clearly in a pushing mode because I'm using the sole of my foot. My left foot is clearly in a pulling mode. My right cross-collar grip is in a pulling mode, and so is my left hand. So you can see one part of my body is pushing, and three parts of my body are pulling. When my opponent goes to move around from here, actively pulling away, pushing in, You have excellent control. 4 points of connection to your opponent's body. Okay. Understand that the various 4 points of connection can all be working in different fashions. Some pulling, some pushing. And learning to juxtapose, push and pull through the sole of the feet and the shoelace of the feet is a big, big part of your development. Now, our goal in this video is to make you damn good at open guard. If there's one insight that's going to double your effectiveness from open guard situations and increase your ability to score points and get on the attack successfully from open guard, it's mastery of a position that often gets overlooked, and that's the double-seated position. Okay, first, what the hell is a double-seated position? That's any situation where the two athletes are sitting, see, in front of each other, like so. Okay, now you might be asking yourself, what the hell does this have to do with open guard? Okay, open guard, the guy should be on his knees or standing or on one knee in front of me. Here, you're both sitting on your ass. Well, it has everything to do with open guard. I'll tell you why. Because it's this position that 9 times out of 10, when you perform a sweep from open guard, the two athletes end up in. Okay, let's contrast this with closed guard. If Mateus is in my closed guard, my hips are higher than Mateus's hips. So if I were to come up from bottom closed guard, because my hips are higher than his, if I were to come up from a closed guard situation and sweep and my hips higher than his, means that when we land, my hips are on top of his. Okay, so I end up not only with the sweep itself, but a guaranteed top position. Okay, it's also true for sweeps where you take someone over your head. Okay, so for example, in Tomoe Nage, any variation of Tomoe Nage, here, because I'm taking my training partner up and over my head, if I follow the man, I end up almost always with my body higher than his, and top position is the result. But the vast majority of open guard sweeps in the modern sport of jiu-jitsu are typically sweeps to the back. And what they almost always result in is situations where you get a knockdown on your opponent, where you put him down to his buttocks, but you don't get your hips on top of his hips. So for example, ashigarami. My opponent stands over me. And from here, I come away into an ashigarami type situation, and I knock Mateus down. You can clearly see my hips are not on top of his. In a competitive situation, Mateus is going to land on his hand. His head and my head are the same height. His hips and my hips are the same height. Okay, so there's no guarantee you're going to end up on top. I might have knocked him down to his ass, but if Mateus quickly recovers and comes back, you're right back to square one. Okay, this is true for the vast majority of open guard sweeps. I don't care how you cut. Okay, shin sweeps. I get double shin and knock Mateus down. Where do we end up? Double-seated position. Both of us have a hand on the floor, our heads are the same height, and from here our hips are the same height. So it's going to be a scramble as to who gets up on top. Okay? You show me any of the major sweeps from open guard, and you're going to see that they all have this in common. Okay? In any situation, when we knock the man down, it's almost all ending up here in the double-seated position. And that's where things get interesting. Because you knocked him down to his buttocks, but you don't score points until you get on top of your opponent. So you scored a knockdown, but you haven't scored a sweep. It's not officially a sweep until I get up and he stays down. What this means is that if 90% of the sweeps of open guard result in double-seated position, you better be damn good at scrambling up faster than he is. Now, here's where things go wrong. Whenever we scramble to get up together, the movement used is usually referred to as a hip heist. Okay? In a hip heist, I go from a hand on the floor, buttocks on the mat, and my head up. And to heist, I have a planted foot and a heisting foot. Okay? The post foot here enables me to take my hips off the mat. Then my heisting foot gets me up, and I'm in, hopefully, top position. Okay? The pattern is always the same. From a seated position, we have a posted hand and a posted foot. And as a result, this enables us to heist a leg and come up. You can see what's going to happen here. If I have a standing opponent over me and I hit any one of the basic sweeps that result in double-seated position, say for example a tripod sweep, we both have the ability to heist. As Mateus and I both heist together, we end up in neutral position. And so I scored a knockdown, possibly an advantage, but I didn't score points. Do you see what's going on here? This is an insight of considerable significance for your open guard development. The vast majority of sweeps from open guard do not automatically give you top position. Rather, they give you double-seated position. And then it's up to you to do what's right to score. Knocking someone down to their ass doesn't mean you score. It's a good thing, but it's not the end of the matter. It's not over until you get on top and the other guy stays down. So how are we going to ensure, or at least make it very likely, that we're going to win these scrambles every time? It goes back to understanding the very nature of the hip heist. Mateus, just take a seated position in front of me. We know when Mateus goes to heist, he requires a hand on the floor, he requires a foot on the floor, and he has a heisting leg. So he has a stationary leg and a moving leg. If I were able to control the heisting leg and Mateus went to go to get up, it's always going to be difficult for him. Okay? If you can control that heisting leg. If I was perhaps a little slow and I reached for the heisting leg and I was too slow and I missed it, I could control the posted leg and take advantage of that. And then from here, I could perhaps work my opponent down to the mat. So you've got two shots here. You can go after your opponent's heisting leg, and if you miss that, you can go after your opponent's posted leg. What I'm going to recommend is to avoid this very common mistake. Okay, I've got an opponent in front of me standing. So many times we see simple things like this. Okay, we're working from bottom position, working with one of our favorite grits that we spent so much time on in this video, and in the course of the action, as everything's going on here, we trip our training partner down to the mat. The natural tendency here is to stay on the upper body. Just give me a hand back, buddy, and just stay here on the upper body. It's a natural tendency we all have. Okay, but as I stay on the upper body, nothing's controlling the lower body. So now Mateus just heists, and we're right back to square one. There was no control of my opponent. Okay, at least no effective control. Here's the basic insight of the double-seated position. You're probably going to start with upper body grips when you sweep your opponent from open guard. But once he lands in the double-seated position, you must make a switch from upper body to lower body. It's as simple as that. You must grab a hold of either the heisting leg or the posting leg, and in this way, you will dominate most of the scrambles for top position, and you will actually start scoring. Remember, you must distinguish between knocking someone down and sweeping them. They are two different things. Okay? Knocking someone down is a good thing, but it's only a great thing when you actually get up on top and score your points and complete the process you've started. So, I'll demonstrate it out of a tripod sweep, since that's one of the main sweeps that we use out of the main form of guard that we use. Okay, we know that our primary initial connection to our training partner is the cross lapel grip. Okay, it's one of the best ways to get in on an opponent. We know we can use that to draw people in towards us and then get to a cuff grip. Okay, if I have cross collar and cuff, it's a pretty easy thing for us to start putting feet on the hip and a foot on the bicep, just like so. This is a fantastic all-round versatile form of guard position that we often make use of. Now, as we were in a competitive situation here, Mateus is fighting position, moving around with me. Now we just go straight through, we catch our training partner, and as a result, we knock him down. Now you can see what's happening here. If I stay on the upper body, he's going to get up. Okay? So it's absolutely critical in these situations that we get a hand to the pants. Okay? I come off the upper body, and I go down to the pants. Now, as Mateus goes to get up, you've got the pants. And you're in a position now where you'll always be able to run your opponent down. Even if he should stand up with me at this point, you've got him on one leg. And as a result, it's going to be very easy for us to drive that man back down to the mat. And now you've got top position. Your hips are on top of his hips. Okay? And you're in a position to start working. Regardless of what open guard sweep you use, it doesn't matter. It's always going to be the same pattern. You knock him down to his butt and achieve the double-seated position. Then you transition your hands to the lower body. Avoid the temptation to stay on the upper body that you started with. Go to the lower body and dominate the scramble to get your top position. Another way. We've got an opponent standing over us. We go through, we get hold of our training partner and draw him in, and we hit double shin sweep. Okay? From double shin, as we both go to get up together, we walk the man through, and now we're in the perfect position to drive the man down to the mat and dominate the end of the sweep. This can be done in so many different ways. We're working in, we draw a man in to Ashigarami. I knock him down successfully with Ashigarami. This is my cross grip here. Okay, it doesn't have to be a straight grip. Just anything on the gi pants. Okay, from here we go up together. You're in a position now we can come through and knock the man down to the mat. Okay, but you've got to get down to the legs. You've got to go from upper body to the legs and get down and get top position. Remember, it's not a point just sitting down, buddy. In your butt. It's not a point until his hips are down and my hips are up. Now you sweep your opponent. Down here, nothing's been scored. At the most, an advantage. Okay, you've done a good thing, but it's not over until it's over. So drop those hands from the upper body and bring them down to the lower body. Okay, now when we go up together, it's going to be so much more difficult for my opponent to get away from me. And as a result, you'll be able to get that top position with you on your knees, your hips higher than his, and yes, you'll score your points. You must take this seriously. Nothing sadder than watching a guy doing good moves, getting a man out of balance, knocking him down to his butt, and not getting the reward because he just doesn't understand double-seated position. If you get the guy down to double-seated, 8 times out of 10, if you get a hold of your opponent's gi pants, you should be able to score. Understand you got 2 legs to attack. Got the opponent here in front of us. If you've done a good job knocking him down and he's got his highest leg ready to go, and you reach for the highest leg and he's just faster than you and it's gone, okay, be aware you can always come back to the second leg. Okay, and once we get that second leg up, it's going to be pretty easy for you to put him down. Don't think because you're a little bit slower than your opponent, you missed the highest leg, that you're a failure. Okay, you've always got the posted leg as a backup. The posted leg's stationary. It's pretty easy to grab it. Okay, but if you can get to the highest leg, that's a good one too. So take this seriously. Okay, don't be satisfied with just knocking people down. Knock them down and get on top. And the path to getting on top is your opponent's lower body. I know we start typically with upper body grips, but don't just hold on upper body and think, oh, I've got control. No. The part of control you need now is changed. You've gone from a sweeping situation to double-seated. And in double-seated, it's the man who controls the legs who will dominate the scramble, not the upper body. Now, in this video, we're going to be showing you a large number of techniques from open guard. But in practice, your first responsibility when you first approach your opponent is to get safely into an open guard position, because there's a lot of things that can go wrong. Let's think about this. When I work from open guard, my 2 basic choices are between seated positions and supine positions. The general advantage of seated positions is mobility. It's not as mobile as my opponent. If he's on 2 feet, he's going to be more mobile than me. But being seated gives me much more mobility and an ability to reach forward towards my opponent than if I'm here in a supine position, where my legs can reach, but my arms aren't much good from this position. Okay. Now, the big question is, how am I going to first get contact with my opponent in a way that confers advantage to me? Because there's a lot of things that can go wrong here, okay? If I approach my opponent too square on, my opponent now can start passing in either direction and getting a beat on me, and now he's got angle on me. This is a problem, okay? He has 2 choices to go. He can go left or right, and I'm not sure which. I don't really have any contact with the man, and I don't have any control over him. That's not really the ideal way to approach an opponent, where you're having to guess which way he's going and kind of reacting to what he's doing. If I play passively and I let my opponent get an angle, now I've got to, as he comes around to an angle, for example, I've got to start getting my grip, swimming my feet in, and I'm reacting to what he's doing. Okay, but that's not wrong. You can do well with that, but probably a better way to approach this is to say, let me approach him and establish first contact upon him, so that I dictate the entry into open guard rather than he dictates the entry into open guard. Now, of course, the $1 billion question here is, well, how are you going to do that? The key is to control my opponent's head and his foot position, okay? Now, the good news is we're working here with a gi. So anytime we get a hold of our training partner's lapels, By extension, this will give you control of the head, because of course the lapels go around the neck, neck's connected to the head. So a pull on the lapels will always be a pull upon your opponent's head. When I go towards my opponent, I typically take a seated position with 1 foot forward and 1 foot back and a brace hand behind me. And I have a lead hand which I use to make contact with my opponent. Okay. Now, when I come out towards my opponent, my ultimate goal is to go here and get the cross collar grip. Okay. The beauty of the cross collar grip, kneeling position in front of you, the beauty of the cross collar grip is that all 4 fingers immediately go straight inside and establish a first strong contact with my opponent, as opposed to straight grips where only the thumb goes inside, the fingers are outside. It takes a little while for me to get a good grip on my opponent. Okay, so the advantage of this is you can fence or jab your hand straight in, and there's that contact. You've got immediate control of your opponent's head, and you're off to a good start. Okay, so it's the fastest way to get a grip around our opponent's head is always cross collar, bang, in it goes, and we're ready to attack. So we have a standing opponent, and I want to go to work. From here, with my hand behind me, I want to go straight in. But like most things in life, if you go straight for your goals in a competitive situation, your opponent will try to stop you. Okay, so if my opponent's naive and the hands are not really defending, I could go straight in, bang, and there's my initial contact. Okay, but in truth, Mateus knows that I would like to control his cross collar, and he'll make things difficult. When I reach, he'll parry with his hands, and it can be quite hard for us to get in. So what I often recommend is an indirect route to get to your opponent's cross collar. So say, for example, what I'll do is I will fake an interest in one of Mateus's hands. And as he goes to pull away, I'll take what I really wanted, the cross collar. Or, for example, I'll go grab a hand. As Mateus goes to pull away, I'll take what I really wanted and get the cross collar. Okay? So if you feel your opponent's not particularly attuned to grip fighting, you might just go straight, bang, and just fence your hand right in. But if you feel he's a good hand fighter and knows how to fight for grips, then we might have to go an indirect route where I fake an interest in a hand and then go to what I really wanted all along and get that cross collar grip just like so. Okay? Now, you'll notice I was grabbing a particular cross collar. I didn't go here on my opponent's lead leg side, because what I want to do is I don't just want to control my opponent's head. I want to control his foot position. In particular, I would like to square my opponent up. Right now, he has a staggered stance. He has 1 foot forward and 1 foot back. When I take cross lapel grip and I pull, watch what happens to my opponent's rear leg. It has to come forward. Okay, otherwise he'll fall flat on his face. So he has to take a step. So once we get a hold of our opponent, the next thing is to get him moving in the directions we want him to move. So I give a pull and I square him up. Okay. Now it's time for me to enter with my legs. If I just put my legs up, my opponent can throw my legs to the side and immediately take the advantage. He's got an angle on me now, which is going to prove problematic for me. So what I recommend to my students is when they enter with the legs, they enter with their feet inside, hooked behind the knees, so that when my opponent goes to throw my legs around, I'm hooked. Have your knees splayed open. Don't have your knees close together. We can throw the legs through his legs and cause problems. Or he can just, because the knees are together, he can push the knees to one side and smash the knees together. This is not a good thing. So we want to make sure that we hook with the feet and our toes point outwards so that you have a sticky connection. Okay? Don't just put your foot in weak and limp behind your training partner's legs. He can easily step out of this and cause problems. What we want is an active hook where my toes retract backwards towards myself and hook in with tension. So when he goes to step around, move, etc., you're hooked in, you're controlling your opponent. Okay? That's always the hook we make, a sticky hook behind each knee. This sticky hook, used in concert with each other, can generate a surprising amount of off-balancing on a standing opponent in front of you. Okay? And will give you an opportunity to go into many of the forms of guard that we'll be looking at in this video. So once again, we've got an opponent here, and I want to proactively go forward and start the gripping exchange. I don't just want to wait for Mateus to come to me and then react to what he's doing. I want to proactively go in and establish contact. First, I want to control the head, and then I want to control his foot position. So I see that he has a right foot back. So I'm going to go towards my opponent and I'm going to take a cross collar grip on my training partner's right hand side. You have the option of going straight in, that's one good option, or you have the option of indirect routes where we fight the hands, etc., and then when he's distracted, then I go in and take what I really wanted. Now I give a good pull and I just throw my legs in. And as a result, we have the inside position and we've changed from a seated position to a supine position. Okay? You still have control of his head. You have the sticky hooks controlling his legs. Now you can go to any one of the various guards that we'll be teaching in this video. One of the themes of this video is that the best all-round open guard, the one which we use most of the time as a default option, is cross collar, cuff, and a foot on my training partner's bicep. So I have a distance leg, so if Mateus pushes forward, my left foot pushes forward, left foot makes it hard. If he tries to bring his hands together, right foot makes it hard. Again, it's a sticky hook in the bicep. If he tries to posture up, cross collar grip makes it hard. If he tries to pull his elbow back, my left hand makes it hard. So I have an ability to extend his elbow forward, separate his hands, keep his head down, and from here, if necessary, take him out of balance and put his hands down on the mat. You can switch from this guard to any other of the guards that we work with in this video. It's an easy thing to go immediately from this guard to variations of danaher guard. It's an easy thing in situations like this to transition across to the second lapel and go into variations of spider guard. It's an easy thing from this position to go straight on through and into variations of ashigarami or X guard. Okay, so it's an incredible way of entering into the open guard game with maximal control. So let's run through the basic steps here again. The first thing I do is I take a seated position because this confers greater mobility to me. Okay, so we start off just like so. From the seated position, I go from square to a staggered stance. I stagger towards my opponent's back leg. Okay, it's not essential that you do that, but it's definitely my preference. Okay, so from here we stagger towards the back leg. Now I use either a direct method and fence my hand straight in, or an indirect method and fence my hand in. From here I give a good healthy pull that draws my training partner into a square stance, and we go into a supine position with inside control of our feet. Now you've seized the initiative. You have control of the head. You have control of the space between his knees. If he went, for example, for a knee cut pass, it's physically impossible because I control the inside of the knees. If he went to go for a smashing pass, difficult because you control the inside position on the knees. Okay? If he went for Torian, difficult because I control the inside position. Hard for him to go for any initial pass. And now it's very easy for us to go into any one of the various guards that we'll be teaching in this video. The default option that I always recommend to students working from open guard is cross collar, cuff, and bicep. Because this is the easiest one to disturb my training partner's balance, break his stance, get his head lower than his hips. It's an easy one to transition into any one of the other forms of guard that we favor in this video, whether it be inside position or outside position. Okay? You don't have to you don't have to go into this as your default option, but it's one I definitely recommend. But I will say that from this initial entry, where we get the man stepping, and we come down, you can go into any one of the various guards that we look at in this video. All of them, we just go straight on in, okay? But usually what I recommend is you go first with a cross collar, cuff and bicep, and then work from there. Understand that this method of entering into the open guard is equally effective if my opponent is on two knees. If we work here with an opponent on two knees, there's no reason why I can't use exactly the same strategy. Okay? From here, I get a hold of my training partner, but now, instead of putting my feet inside my training partner's legs, like so, what we'll often do in these circumstances is put a foot here on our training partner's knee. Okay? And as I pull on the cross collar, I push on his knee, and as a result, I put his hands down to the mat. Okay? And that will make it very easy for us now to access our opponent's belt and start going into all of the various methods of sweeping that we look at in this video. So once again, if we have a kneeling opponent here in front of us, we still want to get control of our training partner's head. So I go from a square situation and I switch to staggered, and from here I either fence my hand directly in, or I interfere with the hands, and as he fights away, I go through and get that cross lapel grip. Now, one good way for us to operate is to put a foot on our training partner's knee and push. Okay. Conversely, I could also use a slightly different method where I go here and I use a push on the opposite knee and get hands to the floor. Whichever one you want, they're both excellent methods. Now we go through and we're in a perfect position now to start going into all the various sweeps that we'll be looking at from this position. If my opponent comes back up to standing, let's say for example he starts on the knees, and from here as I get towards him he goes up into a standing position, that's fine. We go straight away into the method we've been looking at. Okay, not difficult from here to go straight on in and into the various forms of guard that we favor. So this is a very, very simple and extremely practical and effective method of dictating the terms of entry into open guard. Instead of passively waiting for your opponent and letting him initiate where he goes, which side he chooses to pass on, and then reacting to that, we are actively going towards our opponent, taking the fastest grip in the sport that controls our opponent's head, and then whether he's kneeling or standing, getting our feet to the inside position, taking the man out of balance, and going into our favorite forms of guard. In the standing position, the main form of guard that we always work with as a default option is this: cross collar, cuff, and bicep. And from here, you can go into any of the other guards that we'll be looking at throughout the duration of this video. If my opponent's in a kneeling situation, then typically from here, pull the man in and start looking for butterfly guard. This is the default option when the guy's down on two knees. And from here, we can take that man over and go into our game. So this is a wonderful way for us to initiate contact, make a strong first contact with our opponent, and dictate the terms of how we enter into open guard so you can get off to a positive start right from the beginning of contact.